You're listening to NorthWoods Church Matters, a podcast of NorthWoods Church in Evansville, Indiana, where we discuss why the local church matters and things that matter to the local church. I'm your host, Matt Higgins. Welcome back to the NorthWoods Church Matters podcast. I'm here again with Bobby Pell and Darin Garten. Today we're talking about church growth and our responses to church growth, and we've got a specific action step that we're going to talk about at the end of this podcast. But I am not a numbers guy. I am not the numbers guy on church staff. You asked me to paint a pretty picture or to play a pretty song, I can do that. But you asked me to add 2 and 2, forget about it. So I'm going to ask our 2 numbers guys. So can you talk about what's been happening in terms of growth here?
Well, we have just been trying to get a feel for where we are. COVID made everybody confused, and it took a couple of years for us to recover from that. We're trying to figure out, are we back from that? Are we back to where we were before COVID? And I think the one thing that we talked about is leading into COVID, we were right on the cusp of starting a building campaign. We had talked with somebody about starting that, and we were getting ready to head into it. We were running about 475 at that point.
That's right.
And so while it's taken a while to get back to that, we're looking at our numbers for where we are in 2022. And between January and May of 2022, we've grown by about 18.5%. I think we're averaging in May about 454. We had 500 on Sunday. We've had 500 Sundays leading to this. So we feel like we're getting back to where we were before COVID, like our numbers are recovering to that point.
Yeah, and let's pause and just recognize, for those of you who are not numbers people like Matt, these are high numbers, okay? So if a church gets to where they're about 5% of an increase, that's a big deal. If you're at 10%, that's a really big deal. So really where we are right now is we're at 18% from January to now. That's huge.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're able to continue that, that's great. Plus, we went a few months without really baptizing very many people. For now, almost since Easter, we've baptized every week.
Yeah, it's been great.
Okay, and that's been great as well. So we're really in an exciting place. This is positive, really encouraging.
We had a huge new member class.
A huge new member class. That's we had 700 on Easter.
700 on Easter.
So we're excited about those things. That's great.
These things are great. I want to frame this with, on one hand, this is wonderful. On another hand, NorthWoods has a historical problem that I'm going to be asking the congregation to help us try to figure out what to do. And the historical problem has been, one time in the history of NorthWoods, we have averaged more than 525 people. And that one time was when we had one church, 2 locations.
Right.
That is it.
Multi-site.
It's a multi-site. Outside of that, we have never averaged more than 525 people at 9920 North Green River Road. And we're trying to figure out, how do we fix that?
A piece of context, too, that I think is helpful for people is that God has done this in the midst of an environment where a lot of churches are still struggling post-COVID.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Can
you talk about that?
For those who are listening, you can talk to any of your friends.
Sure.
Talk to them about their struggles. One of the things that I'm so excited about here is that we have been able to get past really the post-pandemic problems in church life. Now, let me admit, a lot of the way that that's happened is we've reached a different congregation than what we had pre-COVID. Some people never came back. And I think it's important for people to hear that grieves us. We're not glad people didn't come back. But what has happened is we've reached new people.
Yeah.
And I think that has put us in a wonderful situation.
One article, it may have been Christianity Today, either called this movement the Great Reset or the Great Sifting or Sorting.
The Great Sort.
The Great Sort.
Carrie Nieuwhof.
Yeah.
Who did that.
Yeah. The article essentially said that COVID essentially was the excuse for people to switch churches when they wanted to switch churches all along. Mm-hmm. That they were disagreeing with their church either over political stuff or a position on a certain policy, or they just didn't feel like they fit in, and so COVID became the cover for them to make a switch.
It just hastened what was going to happen eventually anyway.
Yeah. We've had some negative and we've had some positive from that. Right. But by the grace of God, we've bounced back. And so that's been great.
Right.
So let's give thanks to him.
Amen.
Mhm.
That's
that.
exactly right.
Yeah. So there really are two broad themes
Yep.
in terms of how to respond to growth in NorthWoods Church. Let's talk about adding a third service first, which is really a stopgap measure. It's not a permanent solution
It is.
to the problem.
So I think a question that's, by the way, I honestly don't have an answer to how do you get past 525.
Sure.
Okay. But I am wanting to get a pulse on the congregation. And here are some things that are going on in our head. One is do we start a third service? If we start a third service, would you come to it? Is part of the problem that there is a facility problem here that it looks to me like there's room in both services, but sometimes there's a facility problem that isn't about the sanctuary. Sometimes it's parking. Sometimes it's
Restrooms.
Right. So that's one of the church growth principles, not that we buy into all of that. And we're not wanting to grow just to be bigger.
Correct.
We want to reach people. People need Jesus. So we're wanting to do that. And we believe it's normal for things to grow. If
Right.
we're sharing the gospel and people are coming to know Christ, we should naturally grow. People who come to know Jesus, they come into our fellowship, begin to build relationships, discipling relationships, and we grow as a result. We think that's normal. So when we're not growing, one of the things we have to ask is, well, is there something in our systems that's in place that's keeping us from growing? It could be a parking issue. It could be something that we don't realize that's happening when people are driving on the campus that we don't see because we're here every day. And we're trying to figure that out. So is there something that maybe even a simple solution that we don't know that could be a part of the solution to this?
the lobby.
The lobby.
The lobby
Right.
is something that
Yes.
we've talked a lot about because I don't know if y'all have noticed, but it's crammed like sardines a lot of times.
Is it the personality of the pastors?
Is it the personality of Matt?
Yeah.
Let's just go ahead and
He's
say
not a
it.
numbers guy.
I want all numbers, guys.
Is it the fact that we are not attractive? I mean,
Yes, that is.
Is it the fact that I have hair and Matt and Darin don't have hair and I need to shave the top of my head? I mean, we have all kinds of questions that go through our head.
let's go through that option and just say, like we're doing a whiteboard, what are the
Yeah.
pros and cons of doing a third service?
I think a pro is that you don't go into a lot of debt.
Sure.
That's one.
Right.
That's one issue, to be really honest. You can do it pretty quickly.
Yes.
If we chose to, you could do a different style of worship. And I think that there potentially are some people here who may want to, may be interested in that. And I think that there's some people here who may not be interested in that,
Right.
because I think that there's pros and cons to that. I think doing a third service, you have to ask, when would you do it? Because do you do that on, like at Easter, we do sort of 8 o'clock, 9:15, and 10:45. Well, do you do 8, 9:30, and 11? Do you do a Sunday night service? Do you do a Saturday night service? Do you do a Wednesday night service? Do you do a Thursday night service? I think people have to understand if you do a third service, you have to figure out when.
Right.
And so all of those things become options that you have to then ask.
Right.
But I think that some of those things become the benefits.
Yeah. I think the con is we would be asking more of our volunteers.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, and let's be specific about which volunteers.
Sure. Sound team, worship team, some greeters,
Sound team, worship,
possibly security team.
Yeah.
You're just there at
Pastors.
church longer. Pastors.
And if you have kids who are coming to that service, the nursery,
Yeah.
Yeah.
those kinds of things, that kind of group, you would definitely be asking more from.
Yeah. And let's just be personal a little bit. We're old.
Oh, my.
Matt.
He's old,
I-
and we're older than him.
My stars.
Yeah, but
This thing has gone derailed
Really?
fast.
So, we're ugly, we're old.
We're ugly, we're old. Man. All right.
that's all, folks. That's the end of my job. No, but it takes a lot out of us.
It does.
And so after Easter, I mean, we all go home and
We're
go
dead.
take a nap. We're dead.
That's right. That's right.
And so doing that every week is not something that we
That's
relish, but we'll do it for the sake of the church.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. That's right. So I think that we would put that as a negative, but we would not be listing it as an option
If it weren't legitimate.
if it weren't legitimate.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think one of the potential negatives of spreading out people among services is you have those services that they don't know the people in the other services. We have 2 of those already, potentially, although they intersect in other spheres. Well, when you have 3 services now,
worse.
if you have a different style of worship in one service than the others, our thing is we are building a community of people who love Jesus and love one another. we want them to know and connect with one another. The more we spread that out, the potential is it's harder to know people if you're in a different service.
That's correct.
So the second option is to build, and this is the funny part of having a podcast, is it's kind of a time capsule that you can go back about 70 episodes ago, and we did a podcast on capital campaigning because the church had voted to build, and we were getting ready to go into a capital campaign, and then COVID and lost in the wilderness for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was literally the Sunday before we didn't have a service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Intervention of the Lord. So talk about building. There's a lot of different options. I want people to hear.
Yeah, that's right.
Whatever we planned before isn't necessarily on the table.
That's correct. There is a mock-up potential drawing of what you would build in the resource center area.
Yeah.
From 2020. And so that's there.
2 phases. It
Two
has
phases.
2 phases.
It has 2
in there.
phases. That's right. You could build, I believe that had a worship center that would sit about 650 in that neighborhood. It also had some education space. We would have taken the trailer away, added education space that would have also moved our offices over into the church facility.
We're at about 470 right now, seats set up in the auditorium, so that would
That's
be
correct.
a difference.
So you're talking about adding about, 30 to 40% more in seating capacity there. One of the questions that I think we've talked about has been just the issue of how big would you build? Because all of the information that we're getting about people who are going to churches is they don't want to go and sit in a big sanctuary. So they actually want to attend a church. The big thing now is they want to attend a church that the sanctuary doesn't feel like an arena.
Intimacy.
They want intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And so the likelihood is we'll probably build a sanctuary still thinking 2 services.
Yeah.
And so you have to ask yourself some of those questions because that's what people are looking for. They're not looking to flock to these huge facilities.
Yeah. So let's whiteboard this one too. So pros and cons.
Pros are, I think if you do a facility, one of the things we were talking with some people about this week about this as we were beating stuff around is we're no longer in a sanctinasium.
Yeah.
You're able to be in a sanctuary.
Sure. We don't have to move chairs.
You don't have to move chairs.
There'll be some gentlemen that are pleased with that alone.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's a big deal.
That is a big deal.
Well, and I think we will build to solve some of the problems that we have right now in the sense of pass-through areas are so tight. We pass through literally one doorway coming into our auditorium, and we would have the ability to have better spaces for that. Storage is really an issue in this building. We are using every room that we have. We don't have the storage that we need. We're
podcasting in a storage
Yeah,
area.
we are podcasting in a multi-use space. So we want to build to address some of the problems.
So cons, there's one big con, right?
Yeah, a huge con is this is before inflation that has happened over the last couple of years. But last I remember is the expected expense was around $2 to $2.5 million. And so we're currently out of debt.
Yeah, that's one positive is that we moved out of debt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we have no debt. We will have to go through a capital fundraising campaign. So that's one negative. But I don't think you can underestimate the negative because when you go into debt like that, it's not for you, it's for you and your kids.
Right.
We are not the national government. We have to think about how do we pay it off?
Mm-hmm.
Right. How do we pay for it?
That's right.
Can we fundraise enough to make this viable?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a big deal, not a little deal.
So we're going to involve you in our conundrum.
Preach.
So we are going to send you a survey, and you will receive that survey not by social media and not on the church website. You will receive an email, and that's the best way for us to do it, that it involves our membership. In addition to sending it out by email, we will have iPads and interns in the lobby that can help you fill out the form if you haven't received it by email.
That's a great idea.
That is a great idea.
Yeah,
now,
I like that idea.
Also, if you feel like you should have received an email and you haven't received an email, please contact the church office or contact Diane Edwards, our church secretary, at diane@northwoodschurch.org. We'll make sure that you get one. sometimes our records are not always correct. And the best thing for you to do is make sure we've got the right information for you so we can contact you. It's not going to be a long survey. We're not going to ask you a million questions. We're not going to ask you whether the pastors are attractive.
Oh, praise God.
And
good.
Hey, just so people understand what we're going to do with this information is going to our elders.
Yeah.
Okay. So this information will not be shared with the congregation. That is not the plan. But the plan is this information will be going to our elders so that our elders will be able to make clear decisions, getting a pulse on what the congregation is thinking.
Yeah.
So please understand, we really do need an understanding of what y'all are thinking, because it helps us to make our next decision.
Especially if we're going to do a capital campaign, because we need you.
Yeah.
This is not something we want to go into by fiat.
Now, there's a level that if you choose to build, you're choosing to pay.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay. There's really no other way to say that.
Yeah.
The good news is we have all the money we need. The bad news is it's in your pockets.
Spoken like a true capital campaign person.
I just wanted to say that was from Darin.
But I think one way you should be encouraged by this is that, as I said, the elders are not going to make a decision on this by fiat. We want to know what you think on this.
That's right.
All right. Anything else you want to say about NorthWoods right now?
There are exciting things going on. We're excited about them and looking forward to seeing what God does next.
Thanks for tuning in to the NorthWoods Church Matters podcast. If you'd like to find out more about NorthWoods Church, you can visit us at our website, www.northwoodschurch.org. Again, that's www.northwoodschurch.org.